The Winter War by Priscilla Shirer with Gina Detweiler. Chapter 43, Heart's Desire. What have you brought me, Nesher? Thane, sitting high atop his throne of gleaming obsidian, stared down at the two warriors sprawled on the floor where the bone breakers had dropped them. The birds spoke in a series of strange squawks that Thane seemed to understand. Spies, Thane said. Prince Warrior spies? Thane's voice sounded like gears grinding in an old truck. It was worse than even the squawking of the bone breakers. The birds took their places on the high perches to the right and left of the throne. They folded their wings and ruffled their feathers, pleased with themselves. Levi, lying flat on his stomach, stole a glance at Brianna to make sure she was okay. She lay on her side, her eyes open and wide with fear, but she didn't look injured as far as he could tell. His mind raced through what had just happened. They had been captured by bone breakers, carried into the fortress, and deposited on the floor before Thane's throne. At least that's what he thought had happened. The flight had been so breathtakingly fast he could hardly catch up to his own memory. Levi slowly raised his eyes to Thane. Up close, he was even bigger than Levi had imagined. Thane stepped down from his high throne and approached the two warriors. He held his warhammer in one hand, with its spiked tip glowing red hot. What were you doing on top of my fortress? Watching the sunrise, Levi said. Thane chuckled, though the sound was more like a death rattle. He bent and opened his other fist. Looking for these? Levi saw, to his dismay, that the two little pots of water lay in Thane's massive metal palm. Did you think we could not see you? We have been tracking your movements all the way up this mountain. I could have destroyed you at any time, but I was curious to see what you were up to. Tiny little children armed only with tiny little pots. It was quite amusing. Thane tossed the pots away. They rolled on the shiny floor just out of reach. Levi glanced at Brianna. She was keeping her face hidden, but he could tell she was watching those pots as well. I'm glad you liked it. Levi was stalling for time, his mind racing. He glanced at the smoking lava pit behind them. Beyond that was the doorway, guarded by two massive lava forgers. They had to be at least 10 feet tall and almost as wide. More forgers were probably standing guard outside the door. He knew he and Brianna wouldn't have a chance getting out that way. He got up slowly and helped Brianna to her feet. She looked okay to him, just still very scared. He slowly reached into his belt, grasping his kris. She followed his lead. Thane raised the hammer and began to tap the handle against his other hand slowly. The sound was like the ticking of a loud, clanging clock. So what shall I do with you? I could throw you into the fire. Then we will see if you burst into flames or just incinerate slowly as the lava consumes you. That would be very entertaining. But there is another way for you. There is? Asked Levi. Join forces with me. Levi's mouth dropped open. Join you? It is the only way that you will live. Bow down to me. Serve the great Ponyrose, who will soon be master of all of Horitas. Ruach is the master of Horitas, said Brianna, not Ponyrose. He will never be. Silence, Thane thundered. I think she means no thank you, said Levi evenly. We are not interested. You would rather be burned alive in a pit of lava? Yes. There is no way we are going to bow down and serve you. Thane seemed to consider this. What if I told you that I could give you anything your heart desires? What do you desire, little Prince Warrior? A fortress of your own? More riches than you could ever imagine? Power beyond your wildest dreams? I can give you what Ruach would never give you. I don't want anything that you can give me. No? Thane bent forward so his empty-eyed helmet hovered close to Levi's face. Not even your father? Levi froze. He was suddenly aware of a familiar smell. Dead worms. He thought it must be coming from Thane, who was so close, but then he caught a movement and looked up at the throne. Seated there was the blind king in tattered robes. Nameless was here in this fortress? Did that mean that Nameless, death, was under the power of Thane or Ponyrose? If that was so, then Thane might actually be able to give him his father back. Levi hesitated, unable to answer. He's lying, Brianna whispered. Don't listen to him. Still, Levi couldn't speak. He stared into the blank eye holes of the helmet looming before him. All he wanted was his father restored, healthy, alive. He would do anything. Suddenly he felt something grab his hand. He glanced down to see that Brianna had slipped her root around his waist. He closed his eyes, fighting tears. Even if it were true, even if Thane could give him back his father. Never, Levi said, drawing himself up as tall as he could. I will never bow down to you or to your master. Me neither, said Brianna. Thane let out a horrendous bellow and raised his hammer up over Levi's head, as if to strike him down. Levi braced himself, pushing away his fear. He reached over and grabbed Brianna's hand and held it tight. Don't be afraid. I am with you even now. The hammer did not fall. Levi glanced up at the mighty being standing before him, the hammer still poised over his head. But then Thane lowered the weapon, as if he had changed his mind. Very well. You will die. But first, you will watch your friends die. Thane returned to his high throne. The blind king was not there anymore. Levi looked all around but didn't see him anywhere. Maybe he'd just been imagining things. He was lying, you know, Brianna whispered. I know. Thane sat down, resting the hammer on his knees. Levi and Brianna watched him, curious. He sat very still, and yet his massive armored body began to vibrate, as if charged with electricity. The empty eye holes in his helmet lit up, streaming bright lights that flashed on and off like strobes. The bone breakers began to squawk in excitement, flapping their huge wings. What's going on? Whispered Brianna. I don't know. Levi pulled out his glimmer glass and stared through it. The walls of the fortress became transparent, revealing the massive lava forger army charging over the obsidian bridge and heading down the mountain, their horrible voices rising to a roar. Levi turned to Brianna. I think the battle has begun. What's that noise? Evan asked. The boys strained to see through the cloud of Ents. They caught glimpses of something spilling over the rim of the crater. It's the lava forgers, Xavier said. They're attacking. But the fortress hasn't blown up yet, Evan shouted. We need to signal them below, said Xavier. He patted Tannen's hide. Tannen? The dragon moaned softly. Come on. I know you're hurting. Just give me 3 short blasts. You can do it, Tannen, Evan shouted. All 3 boys began to pat the dragon's back and encourage him. Finally, Tannen raised his head, stretching his long neck as far out as he could. He summoned all his strength and blew 3 bursts of flame. The Ents scattered. Again, Xavier shouted. Tannen blew 3 more bursts. Do it again, over and over, Xavier commanded, and Tannen obeyed. Xavier hoped the prince warriors on the ground were watching.